My name is Leah Parker, 34 years old, and the practical disappointment in my flashy, status-obsessed family. For years, they flaunted their mansions and sports cars while I quietly chose a different path to wealth they never understood. Every year at our dreaded Parker Family Financial Conference, I endured their mockery about my modest lifestyle. This time, though, when they laughed about my supposed poverty, they had no idea I was about to change the power dynamic forever. If you want to know how I silenced a room full of judgmental relatives, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about sweet, satisfying justice. Growing up as a Parker in Boston meant carrying a legacy of 3 generations of wealth and privilege. Our family name adorned banking institutions and investment firms across New England, and from my earliest memories, I understood that being a Parker meant projecting success, affluence, and superiority at all times. My mother, Diana Parker, was the embodiment of old money elegance. Her days revolved around charity committees, country club luncheons, and shopping excursions for designer everything. Each handbag cost more than most people's monthly rent, and heaven forbid, she wore the same outfit twice to important social functions. Her favorite phrase was, "Appearances matter most," a mantra she drilled into me since childhood. My father, Richard Parker, barely existed outside his corner office at Parker Investments. A workaholic who built the family business into an empire, he enabled our family's extravagant lifestyle while rarely participating in it. When he did attend family functions, conversations inevitably centered around market trends, investment opportunities, and expanding the Parker fortune. Emotional connections were secondary to financial achievements in his worldview. My older brother Connor embodied everything my parents valued. As the designated heir to the family business, he lived in a luxury downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. His collection of expensive watches competed with his collection of exotic cars, for which he received the most validation from our parents. Connor never missed an opportunity to highlight my shortcomings in comparison to his achievements. My younger sister Vanessa leveraged our family name to become a social media influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers who obsessed over her curated lifestyle. Married to a tech executive named Bradley, she spent her days documenting their lavish vacations and luxury purchases. Vanessa considered herself the family's public relations specialist, carefully maintaining our image of perfection and prosperity. Extended family reinforced these values, particularly my father's sister, Aunt Judith. Sharp-tongued and perpetually disapproving, she appointed herself the guardian of Parker family traditions and expectations. Her husband, Uncle Gerald, said little but nodded along with her cutting remarks, particularly those directed at me for failing to properly represent the Parker name. Their daughter Madison, my cousin around my age, showed occasional sympathy toward my situation but ultimately embraced the family's materialistic values. From an early age, I questioned these priorities. While my siblings begged for designer clothes and luxury accessories, I developed an interest in architecture and urban planning. I would sketch building designs in notebooks and walk through different Boston neighborhoods studying structures that combined beauty with functionality. When I shared these interests, my family dismissed them as impractical hobbies with no potential for generating wealth or status. Architecture is for people who work for people like us, my mother once said dismissively when I mentioned taking additional classes in high school. Parkers hire architects. We do not become them. After years of having my interests belittled, I learned to keep my ambitions private. I still participated in family functions, but maintained an emotional distance from their constant competition and status-seeking. I went through the motions at the quarterly family business meetings where attendance was mandatory, sitting quietly while everyone discussed investment strategies and wealth accumulation. The most dreaded event, however, was the annual Parker Family Success Conference. This bizarre tradition began when my grandfather was alive, supposedly to ensure that younger generations maintained the appropriate ambition and financial literacy. In reality, it evolved into a formal presentation of accomplishments and acquisitions, a show and tell for adults with unlimited budgets. My first adult success conference occurred after college graduation. Connor presented slides showing his first-year achievements at Parker Investments, including bonuses and his first luxury apartment purchase. Vanessa, still in college, shared her growing social media influence and brand partnership revenue. When my turn came, I had nothing comparable to present. My entry-level job at a small urban development firm earned me barely enough to afford a shared apartment with 2 roommates. "Perhaps next year you'll have something worth sharing," Aunt Judith remarked as I returned to my seat, cheeks burning with humiliation. Each subsequent year followed the same pattern. As my siblings and cousins accumulated wealth, properties, investments, and status symbols, I presented modest achievements that earned me pitying looks and whispered comments. My mother would later call to suggest positions at family-connected firms that would help me get on track. While my father offered financial assistance, I stubbornly refused. What none of them knew was that I had my own definition of success, one that had nothing to do with flaunting wealth or accumulating status symbols. And I was pursuing it diligently, completely under their radar. The day after graduating from business school at 22, I declined my father's standing offer to join Parker Investments. The family considered this act of rebellion further evidence of my impractical nature and lack of ambition. What they failed to understand was that I had different ambitions entirely. Instead of the corner office my father promised, I accepted a position as an assistant to Olivia Martinez, a brilliant real estate developer focused on revitalizing historic neighborhoods in Boston. The starting salary barely covered my expenses, forcing me to rent a tiny studio apartment in an unfashionable neighborhood far from the elegant brownstones of Beacon Hill where I grew up. "You went to Wharton for this?" Connor laughed during a family dinner when I mentioned my new job. "To be someone's assistant? Dad could have made you a vice president tomorrow." I simply smiled and changed the subject. What my family never grasped was that working for Olivia gave me something far more valuable than an impressive title or inflated salary. It gave me knowledge. During my first 3 years with Olivia, I absorbed everything about real estate development, property management, and strategic investment. I watched how she identified undervalued properties with potential, how she navigated zoning laws and building regulations, and how she transformed neglected buildings into desirable spaces while maintaining their historic character. While my family assumed I spent my evenings watching television in my modest apartment, I was actually taking night classes in property management, investment strategies, and construction basics. I saved every penny possible, living well below my means even as my salary gradually increased. Where Vanessa spent thousands on handbags, I furnished my apartment with second-hand finds. While Connor leased new luxury cars every year, I bought a reliable used sedan that I planned to drive for a decade. 4 years into my carefully constructed plan, I made my first property purchase, a rundown duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The building needed significant renovations, which I largely completed myself on weekends and evenings after learning basic skills from online videos and workshops at the local hardware store. I rented out both units at fair prices to responsible tenants, generating my first passive income stream. My family remained oblivious. At the annual success conferences, I continued presenting my modest career advancement at Olivia's company, never mentioning my growing side business. Their dismissive attitudes provided the perfect cover for my activities. They had such low expectations for my financial acumen that they never bothered to investigate what I was actually doing. By my 28th birthday, I had purchased 3 more properties using the equity from my first successful investment. I established a property management LLC with an ambiguous name that couldn't be easily connected to me. Each property I acquired followed the same pattern: undervalued buildings in neighborhoods on the verge of revitalization, thoughtful renovations that preserved character while adding modern amenities, and fair rental prices that attracted long-term tenants. I found genuine fulfillment in this work. Unlike many landlords who cut corners and maximized profits at tenants' expense, I created homes people loved at prices they could afford. I maintained my properties meticulously and responded promptly to maintenance requests. My tenants typically stayed for years, creating stable communities and reliable income. By 30, I had accumulated enough capital and credibility with lenders to purchase my first apartment building, a beautiful pre-war structure with 12 units in the South End. The previous owner had neglected the building for years, resulting in numerous code violations and unhappy tenants. Over 6 months, I systematically addressed every issue, modernized systems while preserving architectural details, and created a property that tenants were proud to call home. It was around this time that a strange coincidence occurred. My brother Connor, after breaking up with his girlfriend, impulsively decided to move to a recently renovated apartment building in the South End. During a family dinner, he bragged about his beautiful new place with original hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and modern appliances. "The rent is outrageous," he complained, "but the location and amenities are worth it." I nearly choked on my wine when he mentioned the address. Connor had unwittingly moved into my building, becoming my tenant without realizing it. Since all communications went through my management company, he had no idea that his rent checks were ultimately landing in his sister's bank account. This bizarre situation repeated itself over the next few years. My cousin Madison rented a loft in another of my buildings after her divorce. 2 of my mother's friends moved into the luxury senior living complex I had recently acquired and renovated. Even Aunt Judith's son rented commercial space for his law practice in a mixed-use building I owned through one of my LLCs. By my 34th birthday, my portfolio included 15 properties throughout Boston, ranging from duplexes to apartment buildings, with a combined value exceeding $20 million. Yet externally, I maintained my modest lifestyle. I had upgraded to a beautiful but understated condo that I actually owned, drove the same reliable car, and continued working with Olivia, now as a partner in her firm. The freedom of financial independence without golden handcuffs was intoxicating. I could make decisions based on my values rather than financial necessity. I donated to causes I believed in, invested in women-owned businesses, and continued creating housing that served communities rather than merely extracting maximum profit. All while my family continued to view me as the underachieving Parker who couldn't quite figure out how to succeed in life. Their condescension had long since ceased to bother me, as I found my fulfillment in knowing what I had built while living according to my own values. Until the invitation arrived for the annual Family Success Conference, and I realized it was finally time to set the record straight. The embossed invitation arrived in late September, its heavy cream paper and gold foil lettering announcing the Parker Family Annual Financial Conference with all the subtlety of a royal proclamation. Scheduled for the first Saturday in October at my parents' Beacon Hill mansion, attendance was, as always, mandatory for all adult family members. I tossed the invitation onto my kitchen counter and stared at it while sipping my morning coffee. After last year's conference, where Aunt Judith had loudly suggested I might consider marrying someone wealthy since I clearly couldn't generate wealth myself, I had seriously contemplated making excuses to avoid this year's ritual humiliation. But something had changed in the past 2 months. Through a complex series of financial maneuvers and negotiations, I had purchased the luxury apartment building where Connor lived. The previous owner, facing financial difficulties, had accepted my offer without informing the tenants about the change in ownership. My property management company had simply sent letters announcing the transition, with no mention of the owner's identity. This purchase meant that, without knowing it, Connor was now directly paying rent to me. The perfect poetic justice after years of his condescension about my financial status. As I stared at the invitation, a plan began to form. Perhaps it was finally time to attend the conference with something meaningful to present. Not to boast or seek validation, but to reclaim my dignity and establish boundaries with a family that had underestimated me for too long. After confirming my attendance with my mother's assistant, I carefully prepared for the event. Rather than buying an expensive outfit to impress my status-conscious family, I chose a deliberately understated ensemble. A well-tailored navy pantsuit with minimal jewelry and comfortable but elegant flats. My appearance would reflect my values: practical, unpretentious, yet quietly confident. On the morning of the conference, I drove my 7-year-old Volvo to my parents' mansion, passing through the wrought iron gates that separated their world from ordinary Boston. The circular driveway already displayed a collection of luxury vehicles: my father's Bentley, Connor's Maserati, Vanessa and Bradley's matching Range Rovers, Aunt Judith's Mercedes convertible. I parked my practical sedan between these status symbols, gathered my leather portfolio containing key documents, and approached the imposing front door with its gleaming brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. The grand entrance hall buzzed with family members in designer outfits exchanging air kisses and humble brags about recent purchases and investments. The marble floor reflected chandelier light onto oil paintings of Parker ancestors who had established our family's banking dynasty generations ago. My mother spotted me immediately, her perfectly styled silver blonde hair framing a face with just enough cosmetic enhancement to look 20 years younger than her actual age. She wore a Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. "Leah, darling," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "That suit is simple. Very professional looking." Her tone conveyed what her words didn't. That simple and professional were barely compliments in her vocabulary, which preferred stunning and exclusive. "Thanks, Mom. It's comfortable and practical," I replied, knowing those adjectives would make her wince internally. Before she could respond, Connor approached, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Little sister, still driving that fossil fuel dinosaur outside? I thought you were all about sustainability and the environment." He gestured toward the window with a crystal tumbler in his hand, ice cubes clinking against expensive scotch. "Electric cars still have significant environmental costs in their production," I replied calmly. "Sometimes the most sustainable choice is maintaining what you already have rather than constantly consuming new products." Connor's smile tightened. He hadn't expected a rational response to his attempt at mockery. Before he could formulate a retort, Vanessa swept in wearing what appeared to be this season's most coveted designer dress, her perfectly highlighted hair cascading over bare shoulders. "Leah, you made it," she exclaimed, pulling out her phone. "I need to get a family pic for Instagram. My followers love seeing my sister the urban planner. So authentic and relatable." I suppressed an eye roll as she positioned us against the marble fireplace, carefully angling her diamond rings toward the camera. After taking several nearly identical photos, she immediately began filtering and captioning them while still standing beside me. "Just posted. Family Financial Summit with my brilliant sister who's saving the world one building at a time." That should get good engagement, especially with the socially conscious demographic. Vanessa had mastered the art of using my career as a prop in her carefully curated online persona without showing any genuine interest in my actual work. Before I could respond, Aunt Judith's voice cut through the ambient conversation. "Leah, there you are. Still renting that little apartment downtown? In this market, you really should consider buying something. Building equity is essential at your age." Her voice carried deliberately so everyone nearby could hear. "Unless, of course, you still can't afford the down payment." I smiled politely. "Nice to see you too, Aunt Judith. How are you enjoying your new vacation home in the Berkshires?" She launched into a detailed description of her recent renovation, completely missing the fact that I had deflected her intrusive question about my housing situation. Uncle Gerald nodded along to his wife's monologue while eyeing the bar setup across the room. As family members continued arriving, I observed them with newfound clarity. Despite their expensive clothes and constant references to exclusive experiences, most of them appeared deeply unhappy. My father checked his phone compulsively, frowning at market updates. My mother monitored everyone's behavior for potential social missteps that might reflect poorly on her hostessing. Connor drank too much while bragging too loudly. Vanessa seemed physically incapable of experiencing a moment without documenting it for her followers. Behind their displays of affluence, I detected anxiety, insecurity, and a desperate need for validation. These were people who had defined their worth entirely through external metrics. Account balances, property values, social media engagement, and peer recognition. The formal dinner preceding the conference presentations proved excruciating. Every conversation revolved around acquisitions, investments, or exclusive experiences. My father discussed the new jet he was considering purchasing. My mother detailed her recent shopping expedition to Paris. Connor described his new boat slip at the exclusive marina. Names were dropped, price tags were implied, and connections were flaunted. Midway through the meal, my cousin Madison attempted to engage me in genuine conversation, asking about a community garden project I had mentioned on social media. Her interest seemed sincere, but Aunt Judith quickly interrupted. Madison, darling, Richard was just about to tell us about the Parker Fund's new acquisition strategy. Much more relevant to the family than community gardens. Wouldn't you agree? Madison shot me an apologetic look before turning her attention to my father. I pushed food around my plate and calculated how many hours remained before I could politely leave. As dessert plates were cleared, tension built in my chest. The formal presentations would begin soon in my father's mahogany-paneled conference room. In previous years, this had been the most humiliating portion of the evening, as each family member detailed their financial achievements while I struggled to present anything my family deemed significant. This year would be different. I excused myself to the powder room, checking my appearance in the gilded mirror and taking several deep breaths. The documents in my portfolio would change everything. I wasn't seeking revenge, exactly, but I did want recognition, respect, and perhaps a long overdue shift in family dynamics. When I returned to the dining room, my father was already ushering everyone toward the conference room. I followed, mentally rehearsing what I would say when my turn finally came. The Parker family conference room epitomized old money New England with its mahogany wainscoting, leather chairs, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. A large screen dominated one wall for digital presentations, while the massive table could comfortably seat 20. As always, my father took the head position, with my mother to his right and Connor to his left. "Welcome, everyone, to our annual financial review," my father began, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "As you know, this tradition helps ensure that the Parker legacy continues to thrive through each generation's commitment to excellence and prosperity." He dimmed the lights and launched his PowerPoint presentation, detailing Parker Investments' growth over the past year. Charts and graphs illustrated increased assets under management, new high-profile clients, and expanded market reach. He concluded by announcing the acquisition of a smaller investment firm that would establish Parker presence in the Chicago market. "And now," he said with evident pride, "Diana will update us on the family property portfolio." My mother rose gracefully, clicking through slides showing the extensive renovation of their summer home in Martha's Vineyard. The 8-bedroom cottage had undergone a $2 million update, with interior design by a celebrity decorator whose waiting list stretched years. She detailed the imported marble, custom cabinetry, and smart home technology with the enthusiasm most people reserve for discussing their children's accomplishments. "The property value has increased by 30% since completion," she concluded triumphantly. "Now we'll hear from Connor about his personal portfolio growth." My brother bounded to the front, exuding the confidence of someone who had never faced significant consequences for any mistake. His presentation focused on his investment returns, his new sports car collection, and the luxury ski chalet he had purchased in Aspen. Each slide seemed designed to impress rather than inform, with plenty of photographs showing Connor in expensive locations with beautiful people. "And that's not counting my year-end bonus," he added with a wink, "which should cover the yacht I've been eyeing." Vanessa followed with details about her growing social media empire, complete with analytics showing follower growth and engagement metrics. She revealed her new clothing line collaboration with a famous designer and displayed photos of celebrities wearing her products. Her presentation concluded with a video montage of her recent travels to exclusive resorts where she had created content for luxury brands. "My Q4 projected earnings will exceed 7 figures for the first time," she announced to approving nods from my parents. Aunt Judith and Uncle Gerald presented next, focusing on their expanded investment in commercial real estate and their new vacation properties. Throughout their presentation, Aunt Judith made pointed comments about family legacy while glancing meaningfully in my direction. As each family member concluded their presentation, the tension in my chest increased. I observed the patterns in their achievements, everything focused on accumulation, expansion, and outward displays of prosperity. No one mentioned personal fulfillment, community impact, or any purpose beyond acquiring more. Finally, after my cousin Trevor detailed his hedge fund's performance, my father turned to me. Leah, I believe you're our final presenter this evening. The room fell into an awkward silence. In previous years, I had thrown together modest slideshows about my career advancement or small retirement account growth, which had always been received with thinly veiled disappointment. This year, I simply stood and walked to the front without slides or digital presentation. I placed my leather portfolio on the table and looked around at my family's expectant faces. I don't have a PowerPoint this year, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Just a brief update on my current position. Aunt Judith couldn't contain herself. Still at that small development firm? Or have you finally moved somewhere with actual growth potential? Still working with Olivia, I confirmed, though my role has expanded significantly. And still renting, I assume? Connor interjected with a smirk. Housing market must be tough on your modest income. Several family members chuckled, creating the exact scenario that had humiliated me in previous years. This time, however, I felt oddly calm. Actually, I replied, I own several properties now. Oh, a tiny condo downtown? Or perhaps you finally got one of those starter homes in the suburbs. My mother's tone was helpful but condescending. I know a wonderful real estate agent who specializes in finding affordable options for young professionals. More laughter rippled through the room. I waited for it to subside before speaking again. I currently own 15 properties throughout Boston, I said quietly. The laughter abruptly stopped. 15, my father repeated, his attention suddenly focused entirely on me. I opened my portfolio and removed a document listing addresses and property values. Yes. 3 mixed-use buildings in the South End, a restored Victorian multifamily in Back Bay, for brownstone conversions in Beacon Hill, a small apartment building near Northeastern University, 2 commercial properties downtown, and various smaller residential properties in emerging neighborhoods. The silence in the room was absolute. I continued in the same measured tone. My real estate holdings are currently valued at approximately $22 million, with annual rental income exceeding $3 million. Connor recovered first. That's impossible. You're making this up. Would you like to see the property deeds? I asked, removing more documents from my portfolio. Or perhaps the financial statements from my property management company? Property management company? My father asked, leaning forward with new interest. Parker Urban Properties, LLC. Though most of you know it as PUP Management. The room erupted in chaos as several family members recognized the name. PUP manages my building. Connor exclaimed, his face flushing. Yes, it does, I confirmed. In fact, PUP manages the building you live in, Connor, because I purchased it 2 months ago. Technically, you've been paying rent to me since September 1st. Connor's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. I turned to my cousin Madison. The same applies to your loft in the Clock Tower building. I acquired that property last year. Madison's eyes widened, but unlike Connor, a slow smile spread across her face. The commercial space for your law practice, Trevor. The luxury senior apartments where Mom's friends Elaine and Barbara live. The mixed-use building where Aunt Judith's favorite boutique is located. All owned by my various LLCs. I slid another document from my portfolio, this one bearing Connor's address and my company's letterhead. Here's a copy of the deed transfer for Connor's building. You'll notice the purchase price and closing date. Connor snatched the document, his hands shaking slightly as he verified the information. His face paled as the reality sank in. But how? My mother finally managed. How could you possibly afford these investments on your salary? I started small, I explained. One undervalued property, which I renovated myself. I reinvested the rental income, built equity, secured favorable financing for the next property, and repeated the process. Basic real estate investment strategy, just executed patiently and consistently over 12 years. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked, his expression a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be dawning respect. I met his gaze directly. Would you have believed me if I had mentioned buying my first duplex? Or would you have assumed I was making a financial mistake and try to talk me out of it? His silence was answer enough. And after years of being treated as the family disappointment, I admit I found some satisfaction in succeeding on my own terms, without the Parker name opening doors for me. You deceived us, Aunt Judith declared, though her usual commanding tone had weakened considerably. I simply chose privacy, I countered. The same privacy you all insisted upon for your own financial matters when it suited you. The difference is that I never sought validation through displays of wealth. The room fell into stunned silence again as family members processed this revelation. The power dynamic had shifted palpably, and no one quite knew how to proceed. The silence lasted only moments before the room erupted into chaos. Questions, accusations, and exclamations overlapped as family members struggled to process this dramatic shift in their understanding of me. "Let me see those documents," Connor demanded, reaching across the table. I handed him copies of property deeds, bank statements, and incorporation papers for my LLCs. As he reviewed them, his face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally a grudging recognition. "These appear legitimate," he admitted reluctantly. "Of course they're legitimate," I replied calmly. "Why would I fabricate something so easily verifiable?" Vanessa, ever the social opportunist, was already recalibrating her approach. "I always knew you had an amazing business sense, Leah," she gushed, as though she hadn't spent years dismissing my career choices. "Remember when we were kids, and you always won at Monopoly? I told everyone you were secretly brilliant at real estate." I offered her a small smile, but didn't validate her revisionist history of our relationship. My mother seemed determined to incorporate my success into the family narrative. "Well, this is wonderful news. Property investment is certainly in the Parker blood, though you've taken quite an unconventional approach." She was already visibly planning how to present this discovery to her social circle. "We should schedule a proper photo shoot of your properties for the family archives." "I'm curious about your business model," my father interjected, his initial shock giving way to professional interest. "Your approach differs significantly from our family's traditional investment strategy. What's your typical ROI on these urban renewal projects?" His question reflected genuine curiosity rather than the dismissiveness I had come to expect. For the first time in years, he was speaking to me as he might address a respected colleague rather than his disappointing daughter. "Typically between 12 and 15% annually once renovations are complete," I explained. "Though I prioritize sustainable growth and tenant retention over maximizing short-term returns." "Fascinating approach," he murmured, jotting notes on his leather-bound notebook. "We should discuss this further. Parker Investments has been considering diversifying into urban residential development. Perhaps we could form a partnership." The offer, which would have thrilled me years ago, now evoked only mild interest. "I'm open to discussing possibilities," I said noncommittally. Aunt Judith, meanwhile, was attempting damage control for her years of condescension. "I always said you had potential, Leah," she insisted. "You were simply a late bloomer. And really, your secretive approach was quite unnecessary. Family should share their successes with one another." "I seem to recall you describing my career choices as settling for mediocrity at last year's conference," I reminded her gently. "Well, appearances suggested, that is, you never indicated." She sputtered before Uncle Gerald placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Impressive business acumen," he offered awkwardly. The Parker genes showing through after all. Cousin Madison approached while others continued processing the news. Unlike the rest of the family, her reaction seemed genuinely positive rather than calculated. "This is incredible, Leah," she said quietly. "I had no idea you were my landlord. The Clock Tower building is the best place I've ever lived, and PUP is the most responsive management company I've ever dealt with. You've created something amazing." Her sincerity was refreshing amid the family's complex reactions. "Thank you, Madison. That means a lot." The remaining presentations were forgotten as family members peppered me with questions about my properties, investment strategy, and future plans. The focus had shifted entirely to my previously invisible empire. Connor, after his initial shock, transitioned to anger. "So you've been my landlord for months and said nothing?" That feels deceptive, Leah. You should have disclosed your ownership. The property transfer was handled legally and properly, I replied. All tenants received formal notification of the ownership change. The fact that you don't read notices from your management company isn't my responsibility. His face flushed again. And all those times I complained about various building issues at family dinners? I made notes and ensured they were addressed promptly, I said. Check your maintenance records. This revelation only seemed to irritate him further, though several other family members looked impressed by my professionalism. My mother, still processing this new reality, attempted to position herself as my mentor. Darling, you must let me introduce you to the Beacon Hill Preservation Society. As a significant property owner in historic neighborhoods, you'll need the right social connections to navigate renovation restrictions. I've been on their advisory board for 3 years, Mom, I informed her. My restoration of the Winthrop Building won their annual preservation award last year.
Oh.
Well, how lovely, she stammered, clearly surprised to discover I had built connections in her social world without her assistance. As the evening progressed, I observed the family dynamic shifting around me. Relatives who had previously ignored me now sought my opinions on investment matters. Those who had dismissed my career now asked for insights into Boston's real estate market. My father, especially, seemed to be reevaluating his perception of me entirely. The drive home that night brought an emotional release I hadn't anticipated. Alone in my car, I alternated between triumphant laughter and unexpected tears. The validation felt satisfying, yet I recognized the hollowness of respect based primarily on my net worth rather than my character or values. My phone began buzzing with messages before I even reached my condo. Madison texted first, asking if I'd be willing to meet for coffee to discuss real estate investment strategies. She'd been quietly saving to purchase her first property and wanted guidance from someone who had succeeded outside the family's traditional path. My father sent a surprisingly thoughtful message. Proud of what you've built independently. Would value your perspective on some development opportunities when you have time. Other messages ranged from Vanessa's transparent attempts to leverage my success for her brand. My followers would love a behind-the-scenes tour of your historic properties. To Connor's more complex response, we should talk about the building situation. And maybe some other investment opportunities. The most telling message came from my mother. Darling, please send details about your most prestigious properties. The Abbotts are coming for dinner next weekend, and I'd love to share your portfolio with them. I placed my phone on the nightstand without responding to any messages, needing time to establish boundaries in these newly reconfigured relationships. The family that had dismissed me for years suddenly wanted access to my knowledge, connections, and success. Determining who genuinely wished to repair our relationship versus who simply wanted to benefit from my previously hidden success would require careful discernment. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized that the most liberating aspect of the evening wasn't proving my success to my family. It was finally being able to fully integrate my private achievements with my public identity. After years of compartmentalizing, I could now live authentically without hiding the empire I had built. The month following the family conference brought more change than the previous decade. With my success now visible, I had to establish new boundaries with suddenly interested family members while navigating the complex emotions that accompanied this transformed dynamic. My father requested a breakfast meeting the following week at his favorite private club in downtown Boston. As I entered the wood-paneled dining room, I noticed he had arrived early and selected a table by the window rather than his usual power position in the center of the room. This subtle shift suggested he was approaching our meeting as a more equal exchange rather than a paternal directive. "Thank you for making time," he said, rising briefly as I sat down. "I've been reflecting on our family conference and realized some long overdue conversations are necessary." Over perfectly prepared omelets, my father did something I had never witnessed before. He apologized. "I failed to see your potential because it didn't match my preconceived notions of success," he admitted, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I confused validation from institutions I respected with actual achievement. Your approach, building something substantial without leveraging the family name or connections, demonstrates a strength of character I underestimated." The acknowledgement meant more than I had expected. "Thank you for saying that. I'd like to understand your business model better," he continued. "Not to interfere, but to learn from it. Your focus on restoration and community development represents a vision of real estate investment I've largely overlooked." For the next hour, we engaged in the most genuine conversation we'd had in years. I explained my philosophy about creating housing that served communities while generating sustainable returns. He asked thoughtful questions without dismissing concepts that contradicted traditional Parker investment strategies. By the time we finished our coffee, something fundamental had shifted between us. "I won't offer partnership in Parker Investments again," he said as we prepared to leave. "You've built something impressive independently, and it should remain yours. But I would welcome your perspective as we explore urban development opportunities. As a consultant, perhaps, with appropriate compensation for your expertise." This acknowledgement of my separate professional identity, rather than attempting to absorb my success into the family business, represented significant growth in our relationship. My mother's adjustment proved more complicated. She arranged lunch at her country club specifically to introduce me to her friends as my brilliant daughter, the real estate mogul. Her awkward attempts to reframe our relationship revealed more about her value system than any explicit conversation could have. "I always encouraged Leah's interest in architecture and design," she told her friends, conveniently forgetting her dismissal of these impractical hobbies years earlier. A mother knows her child's talents, even when they take unexpected directions. Rather than contradicting her revisionist history, I observed with fascination as she reconstructed a narrative where she had supported my path all along. Her need for social validation through her children's achievements remained unchanged, but she had recategorized me from disappointment to success story. After her friends departed, she leaned closer. "Darling, you simply must update your wardrobe now. As a significant property owner, appearances matter more than ever. I've scheduled an appointment with my personal shopper at Neiman Marcus." "Mom, my professional reputation is built on reliability and integrity, not designer labels," I explained gently. "My clients and tenants appreciate that I'm approachable rather than ostentatious." She appeared genuinely puzzled by this perspective. "But surely now that you've achieved this level of success, you want people to recognize your status immediately?" "Not particularly," I replied. "I find it more effective when people underestimate me initially. It leads to more interesting interactions." She shook her head, unable to comprehend deliberately downplaying wealth, but seemed determined to maintain our newly improved relationship despite this fundamental difference in values. Connor's evolution from anger to reluctant respect took several weeks. After avoiding family gatherings immediately following the conference, he finally requested meeting for drinks at an upscale bar downtown. "I'm still processing the fact that my little sister owns my building," he admitted after ordering an expensive whiskey. "It's not just the money, though that was shocking enough. It's that you built all this while we were dismissing your career choices." "That was partly strategic," I acknowledged. "Being underestimated gave me freedom to make mistakes and take risks without family scrutiny or interference." He considered this perspective with unusual thoughtfulness. "I've never known that freedom. Every investment decision I make is analyzed by Dad, compared to family benchmarks, evaluated against generations of Parker success." For the first time, I glimpsed the pressure Connor had always faced as the designated Parker heir. His flashy consumption and arrogant demeanor masked a profound insecurity about living up to family expectations. "Would you be willing to review my personal investment portfolio?" he asked unexpectedly. "Not the family business stuff, but my independent investments. I suspect I'm too conservative in some areas and wasteful in others." This request for genuine guidance rather than competition marked a significant shift in our sibling dynamic. "I'd be happy to take a look," I agreed. Vanessa's approach was more transactional. She invited me to an elaborate lunch at the trendiest restaurant in Boston, where she spent 30 minutes detailing her plans for expanding her personal brand before finally reaching her actual purpose. "I'm launching a sustainable luxury home goods line," she announced. "Ethically sourced materials, fair labor practices, but still exclusive and aspirational. Your properties would make the perfect backdrop for the product photography." high-end but with character and history. When I didn't immediately respond, she continued her pitch. Plus, I need an angel investor who understands both the luxury market and sustainability principles. $500,000 for 20% equity. The business plan projects break even within 18 months. The proposal was actually more thoughtful than I had expected, revealing that beneath Vanessa's superficial social media persona lay genuine business acumen. Send me the complete business plan and market analysis, I told her. I'll review it seriously, but I'll evaluate it on business merit, not family obligation. She appeared both surprised and pleased by this response. That's fair. I respect that approach. Aunt Judith made numerous attempts to rewrite our history, insisting that her critical comments had been intended as motivation rather than dismissal. I maintained polite but firm boundaries, neither confronting her revisionism nor accepting her convenient, new narrative. The most genuine connection developed with my cousin Madison. Unlike others in the family, she approached me with honest curiosity rather than calculated self-interest. I've always felt like an outsider in this family too, she confessed during our coffee meeting. Never quite materialistic enough, never sufficiently impressed by the right status symbols or connections. We discovered shared values that had previously remained hidden beneath family pressures to conform. Madison had been quietly volunteering with housing advocacy groups while completing her MBA, harboring dreams of combining business success with social impact. I'd love to learn from your approach, she said earnestly. Not to copy it exactly, but to understand how you maintained your values while building something substantial. This conversation led to regular meetings where we discussed everything from specific investment strategies to broader questions about defining success on our own terms. These discussions eventually evolved into a formal mentorship and, later, a business partnership that would significantly impact Boston's affordable housing landscape. As family dynamics shifted, I found myself increasingly comfortable expressing opinions at gatherings that would have previously earned me dismissive looks. I challenged materialistic values directly, questioned the family's definition of success, and advocated for considering community impact alongside financial returns. At one dinner, when Uncle Gerald boasted about a development deal that would displace long-term residents from a historically significant neighborhood, I openly disagreed with his approach. Gentrification without community preservation destroys the very character that makes neighborhoods valuable, I argued. There are development models that allow for economic revitalization while protecting existing communities. Instead of dismissal, my perspective generated actual discussion. My father asked thoughtful questions about alternative approaches, Connor inquired about the financial viability of more community-focused development, and even Aunt Judith reluctantly acknowledged that preservation of neighborhood character could enhance long-term property values. This newfound voice extended beyond family gatherings. I began speaking at industry conferences about sustainable urban development, writing articles about ethical property management, and serving on boards focused on affordable housing initiatives. The personal fulfillment from these activities far exceeded the satisfaction of proving my financial success to my family. The most profound realization came during a quiet evening at home, reviewing plans for my next project. I recognized that my true liberation wasn't in the moment of revealing my success to my family, but in the freedom to pursue purpose-driven work without seeking external validation. Financial security had given me independence, but defining success on my own terms had given me fulfillment. This understanding guided my decisions moving forward. I expanded my business not simply to increase my net worth, but to increase my positive impact on Boston's housing landscape. I formed partnerships based on shared values rather than merely advantageous connections. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped hiding the success I had achieved, allowing my complete authentic self to be visible in all aspects of my life. 1 year after the revelation that transformed my family's perception of me, we gathered again for the annual financial conference. The setting remained the same, my parents' Beacon Hill mansion with its imposing conference room, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. When my turn came to present, I approached the front of the room without anxiety or defensiveness. Unlike previous years, my presentation focused not on accumulation of wealth, but on the impact my business had created in Boston communities. This year, Parker Urban Properties renovated 6 historic buildings, creating 47 housing units with 20% designated as affordable housing, I explained, showing before and after images of beautifully restored properties. We established a rental assistance fund for tenants facing temporary financial hardship, preventing 15 potential evictions and maintaining stable communities within our buildings. I detailed our environmental initiatives, including renewable energy installations, water conservation systems, and urban gardens on previously unused rooftops. I presented financial metrics demonstrating that ethical property management could generate solid returns while serving community needs. Our tenant retention rate exceeds 90%, compared to the city average of 67%, I noted. This reduces turnover costs while creating stable, thriving communities within our properties. The response from my family reflected the evolution in our relationships over the past year. My father asked insightful questions about balancing community impact with investor returns. Connor, who had recently invested in one of my development projects, commented on the business advantages of my approach to tenant relations. Even Aunt Judith acknowledged that my unusual methods seemed to generate impressive results. The most significant changes occurred in individual relationships. My father and I had established a new dynamic based on mutual respect rather than patriarchal authority. Our weekly lunch meetings had become opportunities for genuine exchange of ideas rather than thinly veiled attempts to direct my career choices. During a rare moment alone at the conference, he confided, "Your success has forced me to reconsider many assumptions about wealth creation and purpose. I'm proud of what you've built, Leah, not just the financial value, but the principles behind it." Coming from a man who had previously measured success exclusively in dollars and status, this represented profound growth. We would never share identical values, but we had found common ground in mutual respect for different approaches to business and life. My mother continued struggling to understand my deliberate understatement of wealth, but made genuine efforts to connect with me beyond appearances. She volunteered at one of my building's community gardens, initially as a photo opportunity, but eventually developing real relationships with tenants and finding unexpected satisfaction in creating something beautiful for others to enjoy. "I still think you could dress more impressively for industry events," she remarked during the conference reception, eyeing my simple but elegant pantsuit. "But I understand now that your authenticity is part of your business model. People trust you because you're not trying to impress them." This observation, though framed through her status-conscious perspective, demonstrated a level of understanding I never expected from her. Connor had perhaps changed the most dramatically. After our portfolio review session, he had quietly begun shifting his investments toward more sustainable, community-focused ventures. He reduced his conspicuous consumption, sold his rarely used vacation properties, and developed genuine interest in the social impact of his financial decisions. "I'm actually sleeping better," he admitted during a sibling dinner without parents present. Chasing status was exhausting, and the validation never lasted. There's something satisfying about investments that create actual value beyond just financial returns. Vanessa's transformation proved more complex. Her sustainable luxury brand launched successfully with my modest investment and guidance, but she struggled to reconcile her authentic interest in sustainability with her carefully constructed social media persona. "My followers expect a certain lifestyle," she complained during one of our business meetings. "But maintaining it feels increasingly hollow while I'm trying to promote conscious consumption." Perhaps your authentic journey toward more meaningful success could become your most compelling content, I suggested. Evolution and growth often resonate more deeply than perfection. This conversation sparked a gradual shift in her online presence toward more substance and less spectacle, though the transition remained challenging for her. Not every family relationship improved. Uncle Gerald and several extended family members who had been particularly dismissive of my career choices maintained polite but distant relationships. They acknowledged my financial success, but seemed uncomfortable with the values underlying my business approach. I accepted this limitation without resentment, recognizing that meaningful connection requires shared values, not merely shared DNA. The most significant new relationship developed through my partnership with Madison. Our coffee discussions evolved into a formal business collaboration when we established the Parker Community Housing Foundation, funded primarily through my real estate profits and focused on preserving affordable housing in rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. We're creating a third option between unregulated gentrification and stagnation, Madison explained during her conference presentation, which followed mine. Neighborhoods can improve without displacing long-term residents. This foundation became my most fulfilling project, combining business acumen with social purpose in ways my family was only beginning to understand. My personal healing journey extended beyond family relationships. I worked with a therapist to process lingering feelings from years of dismissal and judgment, learning to separate my self-worth from both family validation and financial metrics. I developed friendships with people who shared my values, creating a community based on authentic connection rather than obligation or status. The peace I found came not from proving my success to my family, but from integrating all aspects of myself into an authentic whole. No longer compartmentalizing my achievements or hiding my values, I could move through the world with transparency and purpose. The greatest lesson from this journey wasn't about real estate strategy or family dynamics, but about the true nature of wealth and success. Financial security provided freedom and options, but purpose and connection created actual fulfillment. The validation I had once craved from my family paled in comparison to the satisfaction of creating positive impact in my community and living according to my values. As the conference concluded and family members gathered for informal conversation, I observed the subtle but significant shifts in our interactions. Some relationships had deepened meaningfully, others had reconfigured around new understanding, and a few remained limited by fundamental differences in values. I had learned to accept this complex reality without resentment, focusing my energy on connections that nurtured mutual growth. The journey from seeking validation to living authentically had transformed not just my family relationships, but my entire approach to life. Success, I now understood with bone-deep certainty, must be defined personally rather than inherited from family expectations or social norms. True wealth encompassed purpose, impact, and connection alongside financial security. As I prepare to share this story with you, I wonder about your own experiences with family expectations and different definitions of success. Have you ever had to forge your own path against family pressure? How do you define true wealth in your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about finding authentic success. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that the most valuable currency isn't in your bank account, but in living authentically according to your own values.